I'm delighted to be here today to introduce a person who is a mentor, a friend, a former boss, and above all, my coach. Under Geoff's tenure at Guilford, our team had a lot of nicknames. Many of them are here today. They were the Vikings, the Raiders, the Filthy Moes, much, much worse names we won't go into. But today they call themselves the Society of Friends. And they're here with me today to honor our coach. I still remember the first time we met Geoff as a coach. The guy just drew tremendous respect with his presence. He always maintained the look, the stash, the khaki pants, the tie. He's a man of many nicknames, including Chicky, something that was stuck to him because some of our Melville guys saw him, head coach Ciccarone, work one of their camps. I guess he was there, had a similar warming up the keepers with his khaki and the tie on. So that just kind of stuck, and so was Chicky for a while. It was a preppy look. It was something he might have brought from a short stint at Woodbury Forest, but then at Amherst for all those years. When we first met him for an hour over at Guilford, you just knew this guy was in charge. And you just knew that he was going to take us on some great journeys. He also made some things pretty obvious to us from the very beginning. He was going to work much harder than us. We were all going to do things his way. And most importantly, we were going to win. And that was quite a task, as Coach Kirkley just mentioned, when you're looking at Guilford College, a fledgling program in Greensboro, North Carolina. But that just didn't matter to Geoff. He was going to be successful, and he was going to show us the way. And not surprisingly, the theme of success has continued in his life. After he left Guilford College and became the athletic director at Washington College and then at Goucher College. He began his coaching career at Amherst and also Swarthmore. And as a Philly guy, I think Geoff can relate to a description that describes him and his presence. There was a former Temple basketball player who was once asked about his coach, John Chaney, when the Owls were making their improbable run through the NCAA tournament. This fellow looked into the camera and he simply stated, "If coach says a flea can pull a plow, I say hitch him up." Well, that's Geoff. That was our mindset. We knew that we'd always be in better shape than our opponents. He made us work very hard in practice, and 3 days a week he knew not to eat lunch and to have a little reserve because the end of practice was going to be very tough. But here's the one thing that set Geoff apart. He actually ran these ridiculous intervals with us, and not only did he run as a coach, he made the times. So how in the heck could you question the authority of a coach who was willing to work on the field and sacrifice with you? It made a huge impression to all of us. He wanted to play the game with run and gun, which is what we did. He found a way to create depth in the midfields, and we were blessed by some very, very good players that wanted to come south, that enjoyed the sun, and at the time it was a very reasonably priced education. In 1980, he became the head coach at Guilford College. He led the team to an overall record of 63-27, and you'll learn more about our opponents soon. He was named the 1983 and the 1984 Tri-State Coach of the Year. In 1986, the team went 11-3 and was ranked 6th in the country. And he went on to receive national recognition that year when he was named the Francis Babe Krause USILA Division III Coach of the Year. He was also an assistant coach on the North-South game that year. He served as the chair of the USILA Division III All-American Committee, the USILA Board of Directors, the NCAA Lacrosse Rules Committee, and the NCAA Championship Committee. Many of these marauders who are with us today were also present when Geoff was inducted into the Guilford College Hall of Fame back in 2005. He retired this past spring after a 38-year tenure in a career, and he's now phasing into his new career as a devoted son, husband, dad, most importantly, grandparent. I'm one of several assistant coaches who learned the game under Geoff, including Wally Cook and Brian Savage, who could not be here today, but they do send their best wishes to you. He was also joined early on by John Bell, who was our Associate Director of Admissions, a guy who really loved the game of lacrosse and was a phenomenal recruiter. So along with Geoff, he was able to go out and find people like Brian Savage, a ComSwag graduate and eventual All-American. He came to Guilford with some of his Suffolk County friends. Those guys, several of them are here today from Wellport, Melville, Scott Big Daddy Nixon this year, Tom Shordorf, Peter Higgins, and another guy that really helped to identify our program, Richie Metz. His reputation as a coach was growing, and he he wanted to win at the recruiting war just like he did on the field. So he was able to go and find really top talent, not just from the island, but from Philly. We have a Philly guy here today, Connecticut, from the prep schools in Virginia. We did get a lot of kids from Baltimore. We also had success getting kids from Yorktown and Suffolk and other pockets of lacrosse. Heck, there was even this tiny little sliver at one point in South Florida, and he brought in an All-American attackman, Denny Diamond, who reminded a lot of people of the late Tony Cullen, the way he played. Year after year, enough talent found its way to Guilford, and when the recruits would come spend time, and they would get a chance to meet Geoff, see the campus, they just wanted to be part of the journey. And let's just say that their Guilford on-campus visit was special. But when the parents met Geoff, they knew, this is a guy I want to mentor and coach my son. At Guilford, Geoff met his wife Pamela, who thankfully married him and became our biggest supporter. Once they started dating, he showed a little bit more compassionate side, which we all greatly appreciated. Mary Bruce is here. She was our athletic trainer, who was ahead of her time. I recently spoke with Wally Cook, one of our assistants, who reminded me of Mary's cutting-edge care for our players. She simply was able to get people back on the field in unprecedented times, which was something that we greatly benefited from, and we all benefited from a great sports medicine program there. Geoff had a knack of knowing when new things needed to be done. He just knew how to motivate. At one point, he added black to our color scheme. It's not a part of the Guilford color scheme, but he just added it. And he had us all believing that we were the Raiders. He was a master motivator who knew the game the most to get the most from his troops. Prior to arguably one of the biggest games of his career, and the biggest game in Guilford College lacrosse history, he assembled the team for the pregame scouting report. He was meticulous in his notes and his presentation for opponents. He left no stone unturned in these scouting reports. So this could be a very long and involved scouting report, but not in this case. He simply walked up to the board, wrote a number up, and that number was the score from a prior game in this series when the other team ran the score up on us. Enough said. This was payback time, and everybody on the team knew what they needed to do. I think it's safe to say that all of us wondered, at least the alums, what Guilford lacrosse would have looked like if he had been able to stay there his entire career. I suspect there would have been many more titles as the school moved to Division III. With Geoff's resolve and determination, the sky was the limit. With Guilford and all of our alums, the sky became Washington College as he became the athletic director, where his teams had tremendous success. We are all delighted to be here with you today. Geoff, welcome to the North Carolina Hall of Fame.
Well, everybody's gotten up here and said they're going to stay within 10 minutes, and I guarantee I will. So somebody put a clock. I timed it, and I know what my speech is going to take. I stick to the script. The only thing that I did want to reference about the horn was I kind of, as a former coach, feel it would be nice if you gave us a flag first before the horn. That's kind of the customary thing. But anyway, I want to thank Franklin. He's a loyal Guilford College alum, and is one of the reasons why so many of us have stayed in touch over the years, along with Scott Nixon, who's kind of the connective glue there. I also want to extend my congratulations to the other inductees. Your bios I've read over, and absolutely you're deserving. You've made a significant impact on this game here in North Carolina, and I really appreciate you for what you've done, and I congratulate you. I can see why you're being honored. Me, I'm not so sure, but we'll keep going with that, I guess. I guess it's going to happen anyway. I also want to express my thanks and my appreciation and gratitude to the North Carolina chapter of the U.S. Lacrosse Hall of Fame. Guilford College, as you probably know, is a Quaker institution. So as I prepare for today in the Quaker tradition, I took some time to be still, reflect, and meaningfully on our time spent at college. My first observation is to say to you that it is an incredible blessing to be back in the Tar Heel Stadium. Greensboro holds a special place in our hearts. Pamela and I began our married life here. We became homeowners for the first time. Two of our sons, we have 3 children, 2 of our sons were born here. And I've lost my page, so that's good. Here we go. They were born at Moses Cone Hospital, fantastic doctor, fantastic hospital. We made lifelong friends in Mary and Jim Bruce, and I've been enriched by so many meaningful and absolutely hilarious relationships with my former players. I was also fortunate to have wonderful assistant coaches who helped me teach and to establish the culture in our quest for excellence. John Bell, Franklin Zirkle, David Hooks, Wally Cook, and Brian Savage. And in Mary Bruce, in her training room, we had the absolute best sports medicine care of any Division III program in the South, perhaps even in the nation. Mary was much more than a trainer, as she became a good friend who was never bashful about sweetly giving me advice. For instance, after I'd been at Guilford for a couple of years, she asked me, Geoff, that's Geoff, by the way. Geoff, do you know the difference between a Yankee and a damn Yankee? And I said, no. And she said, well, a damn Yankee is one who moves to North Carolina and stays. Needless to say, I understood that I should not overstay my welcome. Seriously, we have incredibly fond memories of our time here, and it's great to be back here again. It is especially fantastic to see some of the people I just referenced in attendance today. It's so great that they came back. I am honored. I am humbled that you're here. Thank you for coming. Speaking of blessings, I recently retired from my job as a college athletic director, and I have had some time to think about what a charmed and satisfying life and career I've experienced to this point in my life. So much of my success has nothing to do with me and everything to do with God watching over me. I'm ever so grateful for my faith in God, for the support and love of my family, and for the opportunities that God has provided me to impact the lives of other people, hopefully in a positive direction. So nothing I've accomplished in my life, including my time at Guilford College, would have been possible had it not been for the protection, grace, and mercy of the Lord. So as I've reflected on why you would choose to induct me, I've been flooded with memories of the 1980s. I was at a game, guys, I don't know how many of you were there, when you were at Chapel Hill, and I think the score, I could have it wrong, was 19-18 in either 81 or 82. It was absolutely, and the best sideshow was watching the NC State fans steal the mascot from Carolina. You guys won that one. A little context here about the 80s. When I arrived at Guilford in 1980, lacrosse in North Carolina was just beginning to explode, thanks in large part to Willie Scroggs at Chapel Hill competing for and winning Division I national championships. We were beneficiaries of that buzz and that excitement, I guess is what I want to say. Players wanted to come to North Carolina and play lacrosse. It was also a very different time and place for college athletics. Multi-divisional games were not uncommon. For instance, during my time as a Quaker coach, we played Duke, Ohio State, Dartmouth, Georgetown, Penn State, William & Mary, Virginia Tech, and VMI. The win over Duke by a 13-9 score in 1984 almost gave Herb Appenzeller, the athletic director at Guilford, a heart attack, as that was the one away game he chose to attend that year. That game certainly made for an interesting shift in my friendship with Tony Cullen, the head coach at Duke. While he had no part in the 44-4 shellacking that Duke put on the Quakers a few years before I arrived, I noticed him scouting us a lot more, and there was a newfound intensity to our annual contests. Another factor that impacted my time here was Guilford's athletic department was in a transition, moving from the NAIA to becoming a member of Division III in the NCAA. Because of the transition, we would not qualify for NCAA postseason play, despite being a top 20 ranked team. Since there were virtually no other NAIA institutions sponsoring lacrosse in America, my players made it very clear that we were the NAIA national champions. The other consequence of our circumstances was that the players approached every Division III game as if it were a playoff game. The men I coached were determined to prove that they were among the best in the country, despite our not being afforded the opportunity to prove ourselves in the Division III postseason playoffs. Which is a perfect segue to make an observation about how fortunate I was to recruit and to coach the players I had on those teams. Beyond their athletic and lacrosse talent, they bought in to a system and they created a competitive culture at practice that allowed everybody to get better. And boy, was it ever a different time and place for college athletics. In fact, it's a miracle that I wasn't fired, quite frankly. And I can say that as an athletic director. I would have fired myself now. For instance, postseason picnics at the house with a keg of beer is no longer conceivable, let alone allowed. Players with a swagger are challenging to coach and to keep focused. I was their alpha, and they often challenged my authority, particularly because I was not that much older than they were. Thankfully, as my family will readily tell you, I've always been a confident person. We all jokingly refer to me as frequently wrong but never in doubt. Amazingly, the players took on every challenge I placed before them, and they took incredible pride in being the best that they could possibly be. Not a day went by where arguments weren't made and the evidence presented, I bet it happened on that team over there, about who played better lacrosse, Maryland, Virginia, or New York, well, specifically Long Island. I suspect that the argument's still going on today, that it now includes other areas of our country outside these traditional hotbeds. Despite the scuffles and the harsh words in practice, they left it on the field and they acted like a family of Vikings off the field. Every coach knows that without players of talent and character, and without leadership, you cannot have success. I was blessed to have men play for me who had all of these qualities, or they learn and develop them once they arrive on campus. Plus, I learned all sorts of interesting terms, many of which I can't repeat here today. Here are a couple of the G-weighted ones. The field we practiced on was called the kitchen, because it was hard as a tile floor and had very little grass. Yes, we used to play on grass. I know you don't do that anymore. The 15-passenger vans we traveled the games in, we fit the entire team in two 15-passenger vans, were called the Quaker Shakers. An editorial comment probably on the quality of the motor pool. And it always shocked me to see a fruit bowl in the locker.